Today we're going to get into 12 stages of awakening. So these are 12 different steps that we can go through to have our experience of humanity while we're here on Earth. And in each step, we have a deepening and an expanding of our experience of what it means to be awake, what it means to be expressive and engaged with this world. So let's get into it. Stage one is when we're actually closed off and asleep from a spiritual perspective. So in stage one, the viewpoint is there isn't anything else, right? The viewpoint is my five senses, my direct rational experience is all there is. Stage one is characterized by busyness, by being lost in thought and dreams, by being focused on doing, and it's a very small and constricted viewpoint compared to the later stages. Stage two is when we have some occurrence in our life that prompts us to say, there's something more, right? So as soon as we have the awareness that there's something more, and we open up to that possibility, we're in stage two. Stage two can be prompted by going to church and feeling the call of spirit. It could be prompted by having a conversation with your friend and them prompting you to their experience and connecting and then opening you up to something more. It could be prompted by a walk in nature and being in awe of the grandeur of the trees or the sky. There's many, many ways we can be prompted into stage two, but as soon as we have an awareness, there's something more. That's stage two. But stage two is a pretty funny place to be because we have an awareness of something more, but we haven't taken any action. So as soon as we take any action and take a step onto the path, we're in stage three. If you have that experience of opening into stage two and then you read a book on meditation, you're in stage three. If you open up to stage two and then you take a yoga class with the purpose of connecting to self in a deeper way, that would be stage three. If you go to church after that experience, that would be stage three. If you read a book, talk to a friend, change your behavior in some way based on your connection to spirit, you're in stage three. It's not all linear in a quote forward direction. In reality, there's no directionality. We're all in all of these all at once, and we'll get to that later. But at the moment of the perception of being in stage two, it is possible to go backwards. And that might look like opening up to the possibility of something more, and then your brain rejecting that thought and closing back down to, no, I don't really think so, and continuing on with the small perspective of there's nothing more than my five senses. So that is possible. Typically, that's rare. Typically, as soon as we're opened up to spirit, our energetic system gets a little bit reconfigured. As soon as we open up to spirit, our heart center, our heart wisdom, our connection with our intuition expands and deepens. And as that happens, we're pulled along this path. We're pulled into action. It's almost involuntary because it's actually the pull of spirit from one perspective, bringing us forward into that action of stage three. So that's usually what happens. Stage three is a really big one. Stage three is where many, many, many practitioners on the path today are experiencing is this stage. And this is we're walking the path. We're taking action. We are changing our life. We are waking up. We are realizing that how we saw the world previously is not the way it was in many ways. So we're reading books. We're expanding our consciousness. We're changing our viewpoints. We're doing all of that. And at the same time, we're still mostly acting from our mind. We're still mostly acting from our mind center, our thoughts. Our heart wisdom, our heart center, our intuition, our connection with the universe through our hearts is opening, but still primarily we are acting from our thoughts in stage three. And that's important because particularly, I grew up here in the US, particularly in the US, in the Western world right now, our thought body and our emotional experiences that come from our thoughts are often very impacted by some wounding and shadow that happened as we grew up through our life. So we have a lot of wounding, we have a lot of constriction, parts of our being and parts of our energy, parts of our experience, and parts of our body, and those keep us constricted and away from the true wisdom of our heart. So this is a stage where it's really great to do a lot of personal work. So much of the work that is occurring in regards to psychedelic therapy that's emerging, somatic experiencing therapy in all kinds of modalities, integrated family systems, all these other modalities of expression and getting in touch with who we are and healing and releasing those parts of us that are constricted and hurt. All of that shadow work, all of those parts are really crucial at stage 3, because stage 4 is a massive jump. Stage 4 is moving into self-love, moving into divine action through self-love. So it's really healing all the wounding. Let me correct that. Healing enough of the wounding that we can act from our heart center. So 3 to 4 is walking the path at stage 3, healing enough of the heart wounding and the energy blocks that we have to move into stage 4, which is being able to drop down from the mind into the heart, just even a little tiny bit, like 1% more, right? And we become directed and start acting from the wisdom of our intuition in stage 4. So I'll go more into that again in future videos. This is a really crucial and important part of the path, especially in our Western countries where we have so many blockages in our experience of ourselves. So much doubt, so much fear is generated in these cultures that we live in right now. So stage 4 is a miracle. Stage 4 is a stage of deep self-acceptance. As I clarified earlier, we still have some wounding. We still have work to do. But we've been through what I call one of the major gates. So 3 to 4 is one of the first major gates that occurs on this path, where we have to have a lot of energy and a lot of intention to move through that breakage. It can be really painful and traumatic for many people. But when we experience people moving through that stage with ourselves or our friends, and we see that, it really expresses as a miracle. The person on the other side comes out as a whole new being in terms of their expression of how they relate to others, how they relate to the world, how they move through the world with joy. This is truly one of the first, all of these are stages of awakening and enlightenment, but 3 to 4 is one of the first major enlightenments that occurs because we literally feel enlightened, lighter. The weight is released because all of the thoughts and doubts are still occurring in our brain at stage 4, but we're not paying as much attention. We're not driven by them in the same way that we were at stage 3. So stage 3, when we have a thought or a fear or a doubt, whether it's grief or shame or any of those things which can keep us down and contracted, we deeply believe that it's real for us, and we're deeply moved and held back by those emotions and those experiences that we've had. And that's as we should. That's what we should be doing at stage 3. That's the appropriate reaction. When we've had enough healing and releasing of some of those wounds that we've had, stage 4, again, is acting from the heart center primarily as opposed to the brain. So again, the brain is still functioning, the brain is still online doing its thing, but again, like 1% more of our energy is being controlled, if you will, by our heart. We can act through that heart wisdom, through the intuition of the universe. We're pulling more directly from the power of the universe, from the universal knowledge, from the universal wisdom that's pouring through at all times. So stage 4 is one of the primary stages where manifestation, as it's currently being talked about, really comes online and activates. So this is where, if we're at stage 3 or below and we want to get into manifestation, right? If we're in stage 1, it's likely, due to how stage 1 is talked about, right? It's likely that if we're in stage 1, we don't believe there's anything more. We wouldn't believe that manifestation could occur at all because we're entirely rational. Stage 2, we believe and we open up to there's something more. So that's a stage where we could be open to manifesting and saying, hey, I want to put my intention to create in my future, right? In all the ways that can be talked about. as soon as we take a step towards that, that actually puts us into stage 3, right? But here's the rub. At stage 3, if we're driven by our doubts and fears and shields and wounding and pain that we've accumulated through our life, we're going to actually self-sabotage the manifestation we're trying to create in stage 3. Not all of it, because we are connected and walking to the path more than we were at stage 1 and 2. So we do have a connection to spirit, and so those beautiful connections of expansion will come through in stage 3. Stage 4, as we drop down into our heart center, heal those wounding and act from self-love, that's when the turbo boost and manifestation really deeply comes online. I love to say that at stage 4, if we get enough people in the globe to stage 4, we would end all war, right? It's that much of a dramatic transformation. It's that much of a dramatic leap and shift of consciousness, because stage 4 from self-love, there's no need to cling on to those tribal differences, the othering, the us and them, all of those things. We can just act from human to human, from soul to soul. And from here through all the other stages, that's the foundation which we build on from here. Really beautiful. So stage 4, we drop into our heart and we start to act from that heart center. As we build our power, as we build our confidence, as we build our connection with that heart mind, with the intelligence of the universe, we move into stage 5. So stage 4 is our first experience of dropping into our heart and being controlled by the universe more than by our small thinking minds. Stage 5, we're channeling that in a powerful way and acting in divine action in the world. So stage 5 is an incredibly powerful place. Stage 5 is actually one of the most powerful places because it's still below the threshold of non-duality, where we actually choose to let go and give up a lot of that power when we get up to stage 7 and beyond. Stage 5, we still haven't dropped away into the universal nature of 7 and above. So we're still pulling power to ourselves in a very active and dynamic way. However, we're actively generating power and generating our actions through our connection to our heart mind and our heart wisdom, and acting in the world from that place of divinity. So it's this really dynamic, powerful place. So many teachers in the world right now are acting from stage 5. Many schools are created from this perspective. There's a lot of activity right now in stage 5 here on Earth that's happening. So moving on to stage 6. From that place of divine action, divine power, we're generating more and more energy in our energy bodies. We're acting from our heart. We're acting in the world. We're making our actions larger in terms of our impact on the world. And that is opening us up to the wisdom of the divine. As we generate more power and more energy, as we naturally, and this is the natural, as we move through the world from our heart wisdom and powerfully act on the power of the universe, as we manifest with great intention, we're pulling more energy, more activity to our auras, to our energy centers, to all of our chakras. We're pulling down and activating a lot more energy than we were at lower levels. This opens up the portals to the higher levels of consciousness naturally. So this opens us up to this experience of stage 6, which is best described as like standing on top of the mountain and reaching our hand through the veil of consciousness. So in stage 6, which we get to naturally from just our action in stage 5, stage 6 is this rarefied place of standing on our tiptoes on top of the peak and reaching our hand through the sky and touching the void of all information, of vast experience. We're touching God through the void, basically. We're touching the universe. We're bringing down the experience of the heavens to earth. Stage 6 is this amazing place of, now I see, now I see. Oh my God, now I see, right? That's 6. It's right there, is a common, I saw it, it's right here, it's right there. and bringing that knowledge down to the duality that we live in those stages. We're bringing down the experience of non-dual consciousness into duality at stage 6. We're peeking through that veil. but we're still grounded in duality. And so stage 6 is a place where, again, much like stage 2, it's unlikely that people stay in stage 6 very long. It's not grounded in the powerful action of stage 5, and we haven't yet stabilized in the emptiness of non-duality. That is how we initially experience it at stage 7 and beyond. So stage 6 is this place where we generate energy and power, and we can reach down and pull down energy and messages and wisdom from the divine. And then often, until we've generated enough to break through, we often then drop down again into stage 5 to generate more power, and then we do that again and repeat a number of times. Is quite typical. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, but we can also go through all these stages with the aid of plant medicines, right? So we can, even if we're at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, we can use psychedelic medicines, plant medicines to open up and minimize the boundaries between all of these stages of experience. So it's common through the use of some of these psychedelic substances that we can take to move through the stage from 3 to 4, for example, and feel the love of the universe and feel like that connection is a common experience. We can move through that stage of power. We can move through that stage of 6, connecting with the knowledge of the universe. And even for a time, depending on how far we go, we can move into that state of unity with all things on those plant medicines, on those psychedelics. We can move into these stages of connection, which is stage 7 and above, with all things. But we don't stabilize there. We don't stay there. Why? Because we haven't done the work in our energy body and our composition in terms of our physical energetic state has not stabilized to be able to receive and accept those levels of consciousness all the time. So we drop back down into wherever is that stable level. If we go too far, meaning if we're at stage 2, for example, and we take some plant medicine very powerfully and we go up through non-duality to stage 7 or 8, and we drop back down, it can often be very scary and disassociative for people. So people who aren't ready for that can have this is called a bad trip, right? People can have a bad experience, and the bad experience is, it's so big, it's so ungraspable, it's so intangible that it can be hard to reintegrate that once we drop down to our smaller experience. The other thing is that moving through from stage 3 to 4 can be extremely painful when people take medicines and move through from stage 3 of being on the path, move past 4, which is this deep sense of self-love. If there hasn't been enough work done, if we haven't excavated our shadow, if we haven't removed some of those blockages, that huge dose of divine love can be overwhelming. And it can be, the bright spotlight of the true love of the universe can be overwhelming and put people into a lot of pain. It can put people into a lot of pain. That can be healing as well, but it can be quite painful to see how deeply we are keeping ourselves small when we're in the spotlight of the love of the universe. Again, I'm going to go more into all of that later in other talks. That's just a very quick and condensed explanation of how that works. So I have a lot of nuance to share with you all in later videos about all of that. So we're at stage 6, right? We're at stage 6, which is we've done enough work at stage 5 to generate and integrate our energy body with our physical body, and we're pulling through the energies from the universe in a powerful way. We're acting on those, interacting with others in the world through this divine action. At some point, we're going to keep going up to 6 and pulling down the wisdom of the void of non-duality from 7 and beyond. And at some point, we're going to do that repeatedly. We're going to retrieve the wisdom from 7 and beyond. We're going to go back to 5. And everyone's journey is different, but it's typical to maybe do that a handful of times or more, maybe less. Eventually, for many people, what happens is then they will fall off, euphemistically, will fall off into the void of 7. So 7 is the first place on this map where we fall into the vastness of non-duality. So, as I mentioned, this map is Taoist in origin, And so in the Taoist system, there's yin and yang. The yin would be the passive, the empty element, and yang would be the active and the full elements of this duality of all things on earth. Typically, when we move into non-duality, we could drop into the emptiness of that yin and yang, even though we're actually experiencing both united together. Our first experience is one of those or the other, because it's too much for our brains and consciousness, our energy, to experience all of it at once initially. So this is typically talked about as the dark night of the soul. This is talked about, there's a number of words, shunya. This is also talked about typically in some spiritual traditions as enlightenment, when you drop into the stage 7 of non-duality. 7 is a place that's not yet integrated. So 7 can be very empty. It can be scary. It can be disassociated. It can be distant. Any of the words that I use now for stage 7 are going to be incomplete. They're going to be, in a way, false, because I'm trying to put words in a simple way right now for a state of nothingness, which is also everythingness. For a state of nothingness, which is also everything. And then we flip into an experience of everything, which is nothing. So we can be overwhelmed by, it's still a non-dual experience, but it's the everything of nothing. And that's the flip side of also stage 7, where we're spinning in, there's so much, and we're in a state where we're not just reaching into it, but it's in ourselves, it's everywhere. And we see and experience the complete unity of all things. We experience in every moment, in every breath, in every movement of our hand, in every glance at anything, the unity. And it can be overwhelming. It's vast. It literally blows our mind. So this is the stage in many Eastern philosophies where they show this iconography of Kali, for example, cutting off the head, right? The spiritual death. That's this, because this is a stage where quite deeply the mind is 100% cut off from understanding and being an interpreter of our experience. The mind has no reference point for what is occurring at stages 7 and beyond. The mind is, by definition, bound into this three-dimensional matrix that we live in, the small three-dimensional physical matrix that we live in. Once we're in 7 and beyond, the mind still functions to do sort of day-to-day actions, right? The mind still functions to keep us from running into a car and being hit in the street. And the mind still functions to keep us safe on the stove and things like this, right? The mind still keeps us safe and keeps working and doing its job. But it's no longer in control of who we are in any possible way. It's no longer at all in the driver's seat of ourself. And on a fundamental way, we realize, and when I say realize, that's not even it. In our whole body, we experience that we are everything. And also that we are nothing. And also that everything is us. And nothing exists, and it all is here. And all the things. And I hasten to clarify, all of those little trite phrases and words I'm using are woefully incomplete, right? This is why around these stages there are thousands of pages of poetry and books and essays written about it from the sages of all time, because these are the state that, words come through our mind, and our mind cannot possibly make sense of the grandeur of the unity of all things.